Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, Bahasham, Barakah HaKodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, the great millstone who rule and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Revelation chapter 11, verse 18. And the nations were angry, speaking of the heathen nations, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged. And that dead is speaking of the spiritual dead, who are also the heathen nations, because they haven't been given the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai. And them being judged is during the first 1,000 years of the kingdom of heaven, where they're going to be building up the kingdom of heaven for the true children of Israel, who are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And that thou shouldest give us reward unto thy servants, the prophets, and to the saints, and to them that fear thy name, small and great. The elect of the nation of Israel, the 144,000 and the rest of the righteous 1/3, who did everything they could to stay in the good graces of their power, Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai, so they could be the first fruits in the kingdom of heaven, the first to get their hands on the heathen nations. And shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth, speaking of the wicked in Job chapter 9, verse 24, whom the earth has been given into the hands of, the border of wickedness in Malachi 1, verse 4, Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. And it's clear to see that they've been the destroyers of the earth with all these different policies and agendas they've been pushing ever since they came into this little season of their final rulership, beginning with the Renaissance. Chemtrails in the sky, pollution in the ocean, GMO foods giving people cancer, strip mining lands for their resources, hunting animals to extinction, cell and Wi-Fi radiation further giving people cancer, these destructive ideologies they push on the people, like feminism, capitalism, communism, socialism, the alphabet agenda beginning with LG, etc., etc. And in this video, I'm just going to go into another example of how you Edomites are those that destroy the earth. This is an article on TheGuardian.com titled, "The U.S. Military, the U.S. Edomite military, is poisoning communities across the U.S. with toxic chemicals. The Department of Defense has ordered the burning of 20 million pounds of AFFF, despite risks to human health." Another example showing that you Edomites are the destroyers of the earth, and that you're also that red horse in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4, that have taken peace from the earth with your sword. This is Revelation chapter 6, verse 4. "And there went out another horse that was red." And what does it say about Esau, Edom's birth in Genesis 25, verse 25? "And the first came out red all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau." You Edomites aren't white, you're red, because your blood chews forth through your skin. I always like using this image. Why is your face so red? It's because you're an Edomite, the wicked in Job chapter 9, verse 24. And that horse is symbolic for power. And power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth. All the different policies and agendas I just mentioned. And another thing we'll read about in that article is the toxic chemicals that the U.S. military is incinerating, and it's getting into surrounding communities and giving people adverse health problems, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. And your blessing in Genesis chapter 27 was the sword, one of your blessings. This is Genesis 27. I'm going to read verses 38 to 40. "And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept." And this happened after Jacob, the progenitor of the 12 tribes of Israel, who are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, supplanted the blessing to the kingdom of heaven from Esau. And in Genesis 25, Jacob supplanted Esau's birthright. Verse 39, "And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven, from above. Hey, the earth being given into the hands of the wicked, which the Edomites are in the fullness of this blessing right now, since they're currently in control of the planet. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Hey, that sword in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4, that red horse had. And hey, it began with literal swords when Esau really started coming into power with the Greek and the Roman empires, with swords and spears and all that. But then it's modernized. It's gone from musket guns to cannons to Gatling guns, machine guns, tanks, grenades, rifles, bomber planes, all the way up until nuclear missiles. And that sword of Esau's doesn't just include physical weapons. It includes his deceptive doctrines that he puts onto people to manipulate them to follow after his agendas. And that sword also includes things like what we're about to read about in that article, destructive chemicals, which give people adverse health effects. But without further ado, let's get back to this article. One of the most enduring, indestructible toxic chemicals known to man, aqueous film-forming foam, AFFF, which is a PFAS forever chemical, is being secretly incinerated next to disadvantaged communities in the United States. And who do you think those disadvantaged communities are? Hey, you Israelites. Remember Flint, Michigan. These Edomites have a perpetual hatred towards you since our forefather got the blessing and the birthright to the kingdom of heaven from them. And nothing's ever going to change. No justice, no peace marches, hands up, trying to find equality or civil rights with these people, it's all futile. The only time you Israelites will ever be at peace is when we're in the kingdom of heaven and these Edomites are under our feet as our slaves. The people behind this crackpot operation is none other than the U.S. military. As new data published by Bennington College this week documents, the U.S. military ordered the clandestine burning of over 20 million pounds of AFFF and AFFF waste between 2016 and 2020. That's despite the fact that there is no evidence that incineration actually destroys these synthetic chemicals. In fact, there's good reason to believe that burning AFFF simply emits these toxins into the air and onto nearby communities, farms, and waterways. The Pentagon is effectively conducting a toxic experiment and has enrolled the health of millions of Americans as unwitting test subjects. The AFFF was invented and popularized by the U.S. Armed Forces, introduced during the Vietnam War to combat petroleum fires on naval ships and airstrips. AFFF was the whiz kid of chemical engineering that forged a synthetic molecular bond stronger than anything known in nature. Once manufactured, this carbon fluoride bond is virtually indestructible. Refusing to become fuel, this Herculean bond overpowers and tames even the most incendiary infernos. Almost from the moment they started using AFFF, the military amassed worrisome evidence about the environmental persistence of synthetic carbon fluorine compounds, their affinity for living things, and their impact on human health. And hey, this compound was originally created to control petroleum fires and other things like that. But since you Edomites are the wicked and the sword of the Most High, as pursuant to Psalms chapter 17, verse 13, you can't do anything right. You weren't created by the Most High to benefit the earth. You were created to destroy the earth for a season and to show what a wicked rulership looks like and how not to govern the earth. As the U.S. Armed Forces became the largest consumer of AFF in the world, troubling questions about what happens after the fire were brushed aside. U.S. military bases at home and abroad encouraged promiscuous spraying of AFF in routine drills, while firefighters were told it was safe as soap. And hey, look up burn pits. Those were burn pits in the middle of U.S. military bases in Iraq, where they would throw completely unflammable objects like spent munitions and other items into it, and this would burn in the middle of a U.S. military base. And a lot of soldiers that came back from Iraq had very debilitating health issues. So if the U.S. military doesn't care about its own soldiers fighting for its agendas overseas, how much more the people in this country, even more, how much more you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the children of Israel. Synthetic carbon fluorine chemistry, now classified as per- and polyfluorinated compounds, PFAS, are coming into focus today as fueling an unprecedented environmental crisis. After the briefest moment of practical utility, PFAS compounds come to haunt life with roving mobility, torpid toxicity, and a monstrous immortality. As we now know, exposure to trace amounts of these forever chemicals is strongly linked to a host of cancers, developmental disorders, immune dysfunction, and infertility. Exposure has been linked to aggravated C19 infections and weakened jab efficacy. And do you think it's Daquan, Jorge, or Abdul in these laboratories creating these chemicals? No, it's Bill, John, and William, Edomites, back in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth. And shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. An example right here of how they're destroying the earth and the people in it. From Portsmouth, New Hampshire to Colorado Springs, Colorado, the last decade has witnessed communities near military bases waking up to a nightmare of PFAS contamination in their water, their soil, and their blood. Mapping the sites of PFAS contamination in the United States, the Department of Defense stands out as a significant contributor to this dismal list. Dave Andrews of Environmental Working Group, EWG, told me. In its initial survey of military bases in December 2016, the Armed Forces identified 393 sites of AFFF contamination in the United States, including 126 where PFAS compounds infiltrated public drinking water. The Department of Defense has active remediation plans at a small fraction of those sites. In 2019, the DoD admitted those numbers were undercounted. The Environmental Working Group's popular map of PFAS contamination puts the current number of polluted military sites at 704, a number that continues to rise. As does potential liability, while some states file suit against the manufacturers of AFFF, the fingerprints of the U.S. Armed Forces are all over the scene of the crime. When federal scientists moved to publish a comprehensive review of the toxic chemical of AFFF in 2018, DoD officials called that science a public relations nightmare and tried to suppress the findings. Beyond damning internal emails, the military is still in possession of a tremendous amount of AFFF. As the EPA and states around the U.S. begin to designate AFFF a hazardous substance, the military's stockpiles of AFFF are starting to add to an astronomical liability on the military's balance sheet. Perhaps thinking the Trump administration presented an opportune moment, the Pentagon decided to torch their AFFF problem in 2016. Despite AFFS's extraordinary resistance to fire, the incineration quietly became the military's preferred method to handle AFFF. We knew that this would be a costly endeavor, since it meant we'd burn something that was engineered to put out fires. Steve Schneider, Chief of Hazardous Disposal for the Logistics Wing of DoD, said in 2017 as the operation got underway. Only one detail stood in the way of this grand plan. There is no evidence that the incineration destroys the toxic chemical of AFFF. Noting the strong flame inhibition effects of the carbon fluoride bond, a 2020 EPA report concluded it is now well understood how effective high temperature combustion is in completely destroying PFAS. In a 2019 technical guide for incinerators, the EPA wrote that our grasp of the thermal destructibility of PFAS is sparse, thinly extrapolated, and currently inoperable. An influential Interstate Environmental Council refused to endorse burning AFFF last year, noting incineration is still an active area of research. Nor was such hesitation restricted to environmental agencies, even as it was sending tanker trucks of AFFF to incinerators in 2017. The military itself noted the high temperature chemistry of PFOS has not been characterized. PFOS is the major PFAS ingredient in AFFF, and many likely byproducts will also be environmentally unsatisfactory. But that hasn't stopped the Pentagon from going ahead and quietly burning the chemical anyway. As the military was sending AFFF to incinerators around the country, the EPA, state regulators, and university scientists all warned that subjecting AFFF to extremely high temperatures would likely conjure up a witch's brew of fluorinated toxins, that existing smokestack technologies would be insufficient to monitor poisonous emissions, let alone capture them, and that dangerous chemicals might rain down on surrounding neighborhoods. Weighing out its own liability against the health of these communities, the Pentagon struck the match. Like I said throughout the article, who do you think the communities are that's going to be most affected by these toxic chemicals? Hey, let's jump down to, let's see, this paragraph right here. The WTI Heritage Incinerator, which burned at least 5 million pounds of AFFF, is located in a working class black neighborhood in East Liverpool, Ohio. When it was built in 1993, residents were told this mammoth incineration could help stem the exodus of factory jobs. Instead of paychecks, East Liverpool got some of the worst pollution in the U.S. The modest homes and nearby elementary school have become home of appallingly routine emissions of dioxins, furans, heavy metals, and now PFAS. Residents call it what it is, environmental racism, and that's exactly what it is. These Edomites have that perpetual hatred towards you Jakes. And then on a larger scale, these Edomites just being the sword of the Most High that can only destroy and not create. Those that have destroyed the earth in Revelation chapter 11, verse 18. But the beautiful thing about all this is that Esau Edom's just about reached those bounds which he cannot pass. And once he does, which is going to happen after the MOB, the microchip implant is mandatorily implemented, hey, those nuclear missiles are going to fly, Yahushua is going to return to save the elect, and Esau's rulership is going to be destroyed, and he's going to be taken out of power. And then that's when the kingdom of heaven is going to be set up, and peace will finally reign over this entire planet. But that's it with this article. Now I'm going to go to a few more precepts before I close it out. This is Isaiah chapter 14. I'm going to read verses 5 through 7. Yahweh hath broken the staff of the wicked whom the earth has been given into the hands of, in Job chapter 9, verse 24, the border of wickedness at Malachi 1, verse 4, Esau Edom, the so-called white man, the destroyer of the earth, in Revelation chapter 11, verse 18, and that red horse in Revelation 6, verse 4, who has taken peace from the earth, and the scepter of the rulers, he who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, hey, with AFFF, toxic chemicals, chemtrails, GMO foods, pouring pollution into the ocean, pushing destructive ideologies like feminism, capitalism, socialism, communism, the alphabet agenda beginning with LG on people, dropping atomic bombs on people like Nagasaki and Hiroshima, going to these different countries and overthrowing sovereign leaders so they can set up puppets that will allow them to abuse that country's people and steal their resources. The list goes on and on. He that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted and none hindereth. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing, because when you wicked, you Edomites are taken out of power and put under subjection of the righteous, the Israelites, you will no longer be able to harm this planet. And as it says in Proverbs 29 verse 2, just to back up that Isaiah 14 verse 7, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. And when the righteous, the children of Israel, are in authority, the people will rejoice, because we're going to run this planet after the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. So there's going to be clean air, clean water. The land's not going to get strip mined for its resources. Toxic chemicals aren't going to get used in the environment. And the family structure is going to be put back in order with the man at the head and the women and children under subjection. This planet is going to go back to being like the Garden of Eden, if you can believe it, even better than the Garden of Eden. And once you Edomites are taken out of power, people aren't going to give a second thought to you. They're going to see you as what you were, that wicked that destroyed the earth, the basest of men, the devil, the serpent, and Satan in the scriptures. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim are edified. Just keep strong and keep pushing this word. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.